Enseignant et politologue états-unien, fils de survivants du ghetto de Varsovie, Norman Finkelstein est connu pour son ouvrage « L'industrie de l'Holocauste », réflexion sur l'exploitation de la souffrance des Juifs.
Unthinkable to have a law like that in the US. I mean, the level of cowardice and stupidity is just breathtaking. What can you say about a country that thinks BHL is a philosopher? I mean, come on. This is not serious. At least in the United States, we don't pretend to have philosophers. So, the law is ridiculous. Everybody should have the right to say what they want, and if it's wrong, then you show them where it's wrong. But the state shouldn't decide what is truth. That should be left to each person to decide for him or herself what's true and what's not.
During your speech, you made a lot of references to Jewish people as well as certain people in your audience, not Jewish people in general, but certain people, especially in your audience, to Nazis. Now, that is extremely offensive when certain people are German, and they're also extremely offensive to people who've actually suffered under Nazi rule.
I don't respect that anymore. I really don't. I don't like and I don't respect the crocodile tears to the crocodile tears. No. I'm sorry, folks. Allow me to finish and allow me to finish. Listen, sir. Allow me to finish. Sir. I don't like to play before an audience the Holocaust card. But since now I feel compelled to. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother, please shut up. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. Every single member of my family on my father's side,
the Jews did not take arms against the Germans.
My late father was in Auschwitz concentration camp. My late mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. Every single member of my family on both sides was exterminated. Both of my parents were in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And it's precisely and exactly because of the lessons my parents taught me and my two siblings that I will not be silent when Israel commits its crimes against the Palestinians. And I consider nothing more despicable than to use their suffering and their martyrdom to try to justify the torture, the brutalization, the demolition of homes that Israel daily commits against the Palestinians. So I refuse any longer to be intimidated or browbeaten by the tears. If you had any heart in you, you would be crying for the Palestinians, not for what's being done.
Always people picking up on Israel. How come there is so much, injustice, in other parts of the world, and nobody speaks about, What is the reason for that?
I think people, listen, I opened the radio, I hear nonstop about Sudan. I hear nonstop about Tibet. I hear nonstop about Darfur. I hear a lot. The only place I hear excuses made for is Israel. That's the place where I hear excuses. And we do have to remember, it is the oldest occupation in the world. 40 years really is enough. It's older than you. The irony is
that the Nazi Holocaust has now become the main ideological weapon for launching wars of aggression. Every time you want to launch a war of aggression, drag in the Nazi Holocaust. It's the suffering then used as another pretext or excuse to humiliate, degrade, and torture the Palestinians. That's the problem. The suffering comes as a package. It then comes, here is the suffering, now we blow up your house. Here is the suffering, now we take your land. Here is the suffering, now we drop artillery shells or shoot artillery shells at your villages. It's a package deal with Israel and its American supporters. It's not just suffering, it's suffering which is then wrapped in a club. And the club is then used to break the skulls of the Palestinians. That's the problem. It's not being used to educate people. It's not being used to enlighten people. It's not being used to make people more moral.
It can be.
But it's not.
I mean,
it's not. That's the whole point. Of course it can be, but it isn't. It's the best thing that will ever happen to Israel if they get rid of these American Jews who are warmongers from Martha's Vineyard. And they're warmongers from the Hamptons. And they're warmongers from Beverly Hills. And they're warmongers from Miami. It's been a disaster for Israel. You know, it's the best thing if they can ever get rid of this American Jewry. It's a curse. The estimates of Human Rights Watch were during those years, 1988 to 1990, the estimates by Human Rights Watch was they said, I'm quoting them, tens of thousands of Palestinian detainees were tortured. The harsh opinion of Israel has not translated into a positive opinion of the Palestinians. Still, if you ask to choose between Israelis and Palestinians, publics overwhelmingly choose Israel as the more decent party.
On anti-Semitism, which is in the press here, it was interesting because they said the rise in anti-Semitism in Britain, people were connecting it to the onslaught on Gaza. How have you seen the reporting of this?
There's no evidence whatsoever of a resurgence of anti-Semitism. What you find is periodically, whenever Israel engages in one of its murderous assaults, there's an increase, a spike in what's called anti-Semitic incidents. So you saw that during Operation Defensive Shield in 2002, you saw it again during Cast Lead, and you saw it again during Protective Edge this past summer. The question is it anti-Semitism? Here is a state that calls itself the state of the Jewish people. And you have a head of state who happens to be a maniac, and he goes around saying, I represent all of world Jewry. He said, when I'm going to Paris, he said, I'm representing all world Jewry. When I'm going to the Congress to speak about the so-called threat from Iran, I'm representing all of world Jewry. So then you're going to fault people for taking him at his word? He's saying, when I say we should attack Iran, I'm representing all of world Jewry. When I say we should attack Iraq, I'm representing all of world Jewry. When I say we should attack Lebanon again, when I say we should attack Hamas again, or Gaza again, I'm representing all of world Jewry. So you have a maniac who claims to represent all of world Jewry, and then people take him at his word and think, okay, if he represents all of world Jewry, then Jews are a problem. That's the logical conclusion. So if there's anyone who's causing the problem, it's the state of Israel and its head of state who keep claiming that their murderous actions are in the name of world Jews. There's a simple way to solve the problem. Stop calling yourself the state of the Jewish people, because you're not. You're the state of Israel. And stop claiming that you represent all of world Jewry, because world Jewry did not vote you. Nobody gave you that title. It's not surprising that in the face of a state that calls itself the state of the Jewish people and a head of state who claims to be acting, that there are going to be anti-Semitic incidents. Does that make it anti-Semitism? I don't know why you would call, if by anti-Semitism you mean an irrational, which is generally how people try to construe it, an irrational hatred of Jews, that's not an irrational hatred of Jews.
Norman Finkelstein, thank you.
You're welcome.